Hello and welcome to Dice and Demons. I'm Emma, and in this video I want to tell you about a new project I just started on. So I promised a friend of mine that I would paint an Imperial Knight for him, and it's going to be painted sort of in the style of a motorcycle. So it's I'm not good with names, brand names. It's like a Kawasaki, and it's like really bright green, and then it's supposed to be purple. So it's sort of like an 80s, 90s Ninja Turtles sort of look, which fits, my aesthetic preferences really well. So of course, I wanted to do it for him. So I then suggested that we should perhaps put on a bit of freehand, so like skulls on the armor plates for sort of a trophy rack or something, like all the different things that this knight have killed or is at least hoping to kill. So that's the plan. So as of this moment, I've only painted one shoulder plate, which is really difficult to see on this small camera. And then I'm going to be painting the rest of the armor plates also with like freehand designs, and then in these bright green, purple, pink colors. And then I have the big like armor, like underneath the armor plates. It's actually been sprayed black, which is unusual for me because I usually spray everything just like white or wraithbone or something. But that's because with the really bright armor plates with the freehands on, I am guessing that perhaps the stuff underneath should be a little bit toned down, just tiny bit. So it won't, so you'll actually pay more attention to the armor plates than the stuff underneath, which is not as exciting, I think. So that's the plan. But for this video, I want to show you how I painted the first of these shoulder plates. So first off, I want, as I said, to do a freehand, and some people could probably just paint it like it is with a brush, but I need to do a sort of sketch first. So I start out just using, as you can see, a regular pencil and then sketching in an orc skull. I've decided that for my first couple of panels, I want to do sort of skull designs I'm a little bit familiar with. So that's why I went with an orc and then also with an ordinary human skull. Then I can venture into more unfamiliar territory. I'm guessing I need to do like a Drukhari skull or some sort of like a Tau skull or something. But for these first couple of panels, I'll just want to do regular skulls that I know how they look, and I know what I'm aiming for, how I want them to look when they're done. So that's just what I'm doing. If you want to do this and you're not completely comfortable doing like totally freehand design, you could probably do like a sort of a grid system and then find a photo online and paint it in. But these are relatively simple designs, so I felt really pretty comfortable just doing them freehand. Then for the purple panel, I use first off my one of my favorite contrast paints, the Volupus Pink. And as we've talked about a lot here on this channel, the contrast paints don't really work that well on large surfaces. It's a bit uneven, but this entire thing will be covered in cross-hatching when I'm done. So it's not an issue for me at all. I've decided that I want to do the sides sort of split so that one side is purple and the other is green, and then the same with the skulls. And I thought that the orc skull should probably be green because the orcs are mean and green, right? So the human skull had to be pink. That was sort of the idea going in. Then for the green parts, I use another contrast paint, and this is Warp Lightning, which is incidentally also the contrast paint I use when I paint orc flesh. I just thought that would probably match pretty well. Once the base colors are done, I use a mixture of Achillean Green and Volupus Pink, both contrast paints, as the sort of basic color for the purple part here when I want to do my cross-hatching. I'm having a hard time finding a really nice purple paint, so I mix this one up myself. It's I think there's more Volupus Pink than Achillean Green in this one, because otherwise it just turns into a sort of darkish blue. But I think this works pretty well as a nice purple baseline for it, because right now, as you can see, it's very pink, and I want it to look more purple than pink ideally once I'm done. As you can see here with the skull, I'm using again the same mixture of the contrast paints, and then I also do a dark outline around the skull, just to make sure that it stands out really nice and clear from the background. I try to be a little bit careful here because I really want the outline to be really easy to see, because when I'm going to fill the entire thing with cross-hatching, if there aren't any really clear lines, then I think it'll just be sort of a weird jumble of colors. Then for the teeth on both designs, I'm using the Skeleton Horde, also another contrast paint. And I mean, I could have done the teeth like pink and green, but I decided that I want them to look like sort of real bone, just to make them stand out a little bit and give a little bit of visual interest to the entire thing. Next up, I want to add some darker shades to my purple pink plates, and for that I am using the Pterodon Turquoise, again one of my favorite contrast colors. And as you can see, I'm just covering the original cross-hatching I already did, and I don't mind doing that at all. I think it almost gets better and better the more layers there are, because it makes it, I don't know, I think it makes it look a lot I mean, harmonious, sort of. Well, that's my idea anyway. And I'm doing the same with the skull. It's the same exact thing I do on both the armor plates and on the respective skulls on either side. And as you can see, again, I go over the outline to make sure that it's really nice and dark. When shading the skull, I'm not trying to make it look naturalistic at all, because for that you would not use cross-hatching at all. But I do try to make sure that I have some of the shadows where you would expect to see shadows if I were actually trying to do a realistic skull, even though I'm using the cross-hatching. Just to make sure that it doesn't look like it's just a really flat skull, but actually something that has a slight, very slight 3D effect. I'm by no means the world's best painter or anything, but I want it to look as good as I can make it, without, of course, spending perhaps a year or two painting this knight. So it's I guess, I mean, that's always the case, isn't it? You want to have a nice result, but at the same time, at some point, you actually do want to finish it. Next up, I want to start working on the purple highlights on the purple armor plates. And for that, I am using a neon purple pigment from Green Stuff World mixed with some magenta candy ink, also from Green Stuff World. And when mixing pigments like this, I always try to see if I can find a nice balance between the amount of pigment and the ink or paint that I'm using. I want it to be relatively smooth. It'll never be as smooth as ordinary paints are, but I want it to be smooth enough so that I can paint it and paint with it, and get these small cross-hatching lines that I'm going for, while at the same time making sure that there is enough pigment in it to actually show up on the model. So as you can see here, I'm trying to add the purple highlights where I suppose that there would be actual highlights on a skull. Again, not going for a very realistic look, but still trying to get some highlights and shadows that actually make sense. Next up, I want to start working on the next layer of highlights, and for that I'm using a mixture, as you can see, of the original purple pigment and then also a pink pigment called magenta from Green Stuff World as well, and I mix them with the same ink as before. And I just use the exact same process as before, except that here I am just adding them a little bit sparingly and a little bit more towards where I imagine that light would hit this model. Once I'm happy with that, I take another layer of highlights, and this is the same mixture as before, just mixed in with a little bit of white paint, again to give it a further layer of highlights. So for this entire painting process, it's very much a question of going back and forth, adding a little bit more highlights, and then perhaps if you think, oh, I went a little bit overboard with it, then go back over it with some of the darker colors. So this is very much something that I go back and forth with, especially for these first panels, I imagine, because I haven't I mean, I haven't painted anything like exactly like this before, so I don't have a sort of set way of doing it. I'm just, well, experimenting with it really. And then for the final layer of highlights here, I am using, it looks like it's just pure white, but it is actually a very light purple color I'm using here. I did not want to go with a completely white paint. I thought that might be, I don't know, a little bit too stark somehow. So I tried to be a little bit careful because, as I've said in other videos before, I don't want it to end up looking like a pastel. Like this is not My Little Ponies, right? This is Warhammer 40,000. So, well, no hate to people painting My Little Pony style Space Marines and stuff, because I think that's awesome, but that's not the look I'm going for here, at least. So with the pink parts, the purple parts done, I start working on the green, and for the first layer of the cross-hatching, I use a thinned down version of the Achillean green. It is sort of a turquoise color, so it is a little bit too dark for the green I'm going for, which is why I'm using a pretty thinned down version of it. The thinned down version has the added benefit of making it even easier to paint with. For the orc skull, I decided that I wanted to make the horns look like it has some sort of grooves in them, because otherwise I think they would look perhaps a little bit boring. It would be difficult to give them enough texture like this to make them look visually interesting. So I decided to add some grooves, and I mean, stuff like this, to me at least, is always fun, coming up with ideas as you paint instead of just having a nice finished idea in your mind before you go. I mean, sometimes you have, and that's fine, but for me at least, just coming up with ideas and being creative while painting and experimenting, that is part of what makes painting fun for me at least. The process when painting the green parts of the model is more or less the same as with the pink. So I go over it here with the darker shades, and again with the skull, trying to not make it look like naturalistic or anything, but still trying to make some shadows that do make a little bit of sense at least, so that it won't look too out of place or like it's just some sort of like a plastic skull that I glued onto the surface of the shoulder plate or something. Like on the purple armor plates, I use Terradon Turquoise for the darkest shadows. I mean, I just love Terradon Turquoise for adding shadows because it is really dark, but without being like a stark black, which I think would look out of place on a model such as this. And Terradon Turquoise as a turquoise has both sort of green and blue undertones, which I think just suits both green and purple really well. For the first layer of highlights, I use Mood Green in ordinary Citadel paint, and I think it works really well for highlighting green, especially if you've used the Warp Lightning Contrast paint as a base and then darkened it up with either Terradon Turquoise or Achillean Green. I think it's a nice vivid green, and it's really easy to work with. For the last layer of highlight on the green, I use some bright neon pigment. This is yellow pigment from Green Stuff World, and then I mix it with some Hex Ray Flame. It's a technical paint that I believe was released alongside the Nighthorns when they were released for Warhammer Age of Sigmar 2nd edition. And I just think it gives a really nice vibrant green, which is exactly what I want for this project. As you can see here, I've used it to highlight the top part of the armor panel, and then I've decided to do sort of an outline alongside the entire edge of the panel as well. I mean, it's not strictly necessary at all, but I think it it makes it look a little bit, it sounds weird, but a little bit tidy perhaps, which is just it's just a look I really enjoy on my painting projects. If you have like nice clear separation between elements on your painting, I don't know, I just really like that. So once I had done that with the green, I realized that I'd completely forgotten to do it with the purple part of the armor panel, so I had to go back and do that. It wasn't a big hassle though, because I still had some of the previously mixed pigment on my wet palette, so it was something that was easy to do. Once I had done that and was happy with that, I went in with the bright green and started highlighting the orc skull. And this is one of the parts of the painting process that I enjoy the most, just because this is where it all starts coming together, and this is where I can see what the final result will actually be. People often ask me, like, do you have an idea going into a painting project exactly what it will look like? And I don't, because I'm not really very good at seeing pictures in my mind. So I always go into a project like this sort of curious to see what will happen. I have an idea of what colors I'll use and what techniques I'll probably be applying, but I'm not really able to see the finished result in my mind. So I'm always a little bit surprised at how things turn out. But I mean, I guess that's what makes it fun too, right? I was actually supposed to be done by now with the armor panels and everything, but then when I looked at it, even though I really liked the bright green, I thought that the purple looked a little bit dull in comparison. So I went back over it with a very vivid pink. This is the magenta neon pigment and mixed just with some of the candy ink on its own. And I know this makes it look a little bit more pink than actually purple, but I think it's worth it because I do want both sides to be like so vivid that it almost hurts you to look at, and I think I've achieved that now. And then I just wanted to paint the teeth, and I went over it with some contrast paint. This is snakebite leather, just painting the gap between the teeth. It's a little bit difficult to see here, but when I'm painting teeth like this, I try to make sure that they don't look too square, because it looks sort of off. So they're actually rounded at the tips just a little bit. For the orc teeth, I just applied the brown paint in sort of striations, as you can see here, and more of it at the bottom of the teeth, where I suppose they would be a little bit darker. At least I think that's a nice look when you're painting models. Then for highlight, I use a tiny little bit of wraithbone. I'm trying not to overdo it. I do not want it to look like he's got or she, I don't know, like really nice clean teeth, but at the same time I want them also to pop just like the rest of the model, which or the rest of the painting, I suppose, which is a little bit hard to do when you have a brown beige sort of color competing with neon pink and neon green. So but I decided I actually like the look of the teeth, that they look more like real bone tooth colored things compared to the rest, which just looks like they came straight from a rave party, right? But I kind of like it. I think it adds a nice touch to the overall design. And then lastly, just because I couldn't help it, even though I said I did not want them to have white teeth, I went over the tips of the teeth with a tiny touch of white. So here you can see the finished armor plate. Oh, well, it's actually not finished at all. As you can see, there is no paint on the trim yet, but that's because I am waiting for something. My friend and I decided that for the trim, we didn't want to go just with silver or gold. We wanted to do chrome. So I'm going to order some chrome paint from Green Stuff World. I think they just released some. It's just a silly idea. This could definitely be done with the silver or anything, but I mean, chrome, it just sounds very cool and like, a motorcycle from the 90s, right? So that's the plan. And you can see what it looks like under a UV light. Again, as I've said many times before, this has no practical use whatsoever, but it makes me happy to know that it can do it. And I mean, I suppose if you brought it to some sort of, I don't know, techno party or something, you would have a really cool model that would light up the entire room. So there you go. So this was the first part of my night painting project. And this took me a fair bit of time, just finishing this one shoulder plate. So this is definitely not a project that I'll be able to finish in a couple of weeks or something. This'll take a lot of time, but that's fine, because I am really enjoying it, and I'm just going to have as much fun with it as I possibly can. And I have no strict deadline or anything, so that's completely fine. If you have any ideas for what kind of skulls you'd like to see added to the other armor plates, I would be really happy to hear it. So please write that in the comments if any sort of cool ideas, as long as it somehow fits within the 40k universe, then that would be awesome. just for fun, I wanted to include a black and white photo of it. People often ask me, so what would could you do this in black and white? And I mean, I guess this could have probably been done in black and white. And now I want to try it out because it actually looks kind of cool, I think. So yeah, just for fun. So anyway, if you want to stay up to date on my painting projects, remember that you can follow me as Dice and Demons on Twitter and Instagram. And of course, I would massively appreciate it if you would consider liking this video and perhaps even subscribing to my channel. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!